Well, hello there, boys and girls. My last video, when I was finishing up the Western Air Patrol radio, I promised you that there'd be a new project coming up soon and that would be something a little bit different. And this one is a little bit different. It's a unique radio, not just because of its vintage, but because of what company made it. And let me show you some details about this. Now, these aren't entirely rare. I don't really ever get around really rare radios. And that's just as well because those are expensive and I'm cheap. So what this is, though, is just a little unusual. And I've not seen any videos on a restoration of one of these. So I hope this comes in useful. I'm going to try and be as detailed as I can. And there's a lot of work to do on this guy. So let me show you what I got. Okay, what is this radio? Well, as you can see, it's an Edison, which is an unusual set. It was designed, Edison's company designed radios and built radios for about a year, maybe 2 years, I think, and that's about it. Here's a picture of one from Radio Museum. This is what the console cabinet looks like, and here's the cabinet on the day that I took it apart, the day that I took the chassis out. It's a pretty cabinet with some sliding doors. It's pretty heavy because the darn thing is built like a tank. This is the power unit for this radio. Let's take a look at it. And I believe this radio was made about 1929, but I'm going to confirm that. Right now I'm in the process of researching these radios. So here is the nameplate. And the power unit is, the receiver unit. I don't know why I said power unit. The receiver unit is a Type 7R, as you can see. Here's something I want to show you that's kind of interesting. Look at this tube shield. Is that funky or what? This is the first time I've ever seen one of these. Big heavy thing. I think it's almost like it's made of lead, or at least it's made of pot metal. And it is grounded. So it sits right there on the tube. Kind of weird. It looks like there was a different style of tube shield here before, so perhaps this is not original. Don't know. The tuning is looks to be, I think it was all working. I loosened the knob, so I can't turn it. But I'll be able to check it out. I'll show all this to you once I dig in it a little deeper. So right now I just want to do a kind of a flyover of the radio. Alright, so the tuning condensers will probably be pretty clean. They're sitting inside these little dog houses here, and that will, my experience has been with Majestics and with an AMRAD that I did, that they stay pretty clean when they're like this. So that'll be nice. This won't be too hard. We'll take a look at it underneath here shortly. And here is the power unit. Of course, there's the speaker, which is on these old radios that had separate power units. Usually the speaker was either built onto the chassis or right next to the chassis. This one, as you can see, is going to need a surround. The cone is good, so what I'm going to try and do is find a surround for this. I think John from Arkansas has done a speaker or two where he's done that, and I might send him a PM and see if he can't help me to know where to get those. The speaker otherwise appears to be in decent shape. As you can see, it's still pretty free here. I don't know about the condition of that spider. I'm going to look at it, but it might be okay. It might be okay. Without the surround, it's hard to tell because it's not centered. It is a big field coil speaker. And let's see here. I believe that all the wires from the output transformer go into this thing from underneath. There will be at least a couple of good-sized chokes on this, and then a couple of film and wax capacitors. They usually didn't have electrolytics on these guys back then, but they would be potted capacitors. You know, the biggest they would usually had was about 4 microfarad on these old ones. So that meant there would be some pretty healthy-sized chokes, and that field coil will be pretty healthy as well. But really, it's not in bad shape. There won't be much to taking care of the chassis, cleaning it up. Basically, it's just going to be to wipe it down. I don't want to try and shine this because it was not shiny when it was new. I've seen these. I've got a power unit just sitting around that I scrounged at a thrift store of all places, and I don't have the receiver unit for it. So that power unit, its speaker is in worse shape, but it will serve as a parts unit for this if I need to. Because I really want to save this radio. Now, I'm not showing the cabinet now. That's because I disassembled this radio well back before I was making videos, and the cabinet has been at a cabinet restorer here in Salt Lake City. And the cabinet is now just about finished. It'll be finished soon. And so I need to get hopping on this radio so it can be ready to put in the cabinet. Once that's done, when that cabinet is done, I will bring it home and I will document installing these two chassis components into the cabinet and doing all the adjustments and all that. And this will be a perfect candidate to try and talk these guys into buying a loop antenna. I don't care if they buy it from me or right from Amazon, but these radios really work out well with loop antennas. So let me turn these chassis over and let's take a look underneath. Before I flip this receiver unit, let me show you a little closer look at the knobs and the dial. The knobs are in real nice shape. I don't know if these are original or not, but they sure do look good. This is probably a sensitivity control. Might be a tone control, but I doubt it. It's probably sensitivity. This has got the power on it right here, and then it's also probably the volume. This tuning knob is gorgeous. I'm going to tighten that up real quick, and then we'll see if we can actually turn that condenser. Well, hot dog, check this out. There we go. Somebody has, and this was commonly done. In fact, that's why the white strip is there. Somebody has handwritten in the station call letters for various stations on the dial for this. And remember, the old dials usually had a space for that somewhere on the dial. And you know what? I'm going to try and preserve that because that's just plain cool. That's just, and they did a nice job printing them, so they're easy enough to read. So I'm going to do my best to take real good care of that dial so it hangs in there. So that is at least functional. It's probably a wire cord. Most of these radios use a braided wire cord for the tuning cord. And check that out, man. There was not anything that man touched without putting his signature on it. Now, to be honest with you, I am not Thomas Edison's biggest fan. Much like David Sarnoff, he was a shrewd businessman, and I'm sure he was a smart scientist too, but he was a shrewd businessman, and he leveraged his name and his company to great advantage, financially for his company. But I've sometimes doubted his real scientific prowess as compared to people like George Westinghouse and Armstrong and people like that. So anyway, that's beside the point. This is a cool radio. It should be fun to work on, and let's take a look underneath now. Okay, here's a look underneath the receiver unit. These will be the coils. This is a TRF unit. These will be the coils, and they will be really clean. In fact, usually I'll pull these covers off just to have a look if there's capacitors in there. Sometimes there are. I'll test them and so forth, but usually these things are pretty much best just left alone. And we have a couple of rheostats in there. I'll sort out when I get the schematic, which I do have the schematic in my computer, so I know I have it. I just need to print it. It's your typical schematic for the period, real cryptic and a little bit hard to read, but that's okay. I'll make it work. This guy here will be a capacitor. This is probably a capacitor. This is probably a capacitor over here. In fact, there's some ooze, some wax coming out of there, so that probably is a capacitor. This may be a choke. It may be I don't know yet. The chokes will usually be on the power units, so I'm not sure. We'll take a look at all of that. That dog bone, believe it or not, is probably not original. Of course, that Aricon capacitor is not original. Acrocon capacitor is not original, but no big deal. What I put in there is not going to be original either. I'm not going to restuff. Okay, this person is real interested in the radio working and real interested in having it look good from the outside. But the truth of the matter is, it costs a lot to restuff these because you have to melt all that tar out and everything, and then clean it, and then put the caps back in. And in the process, you ruin some of the historical significance of this radio. As I've said time after time after time, I don't restuff. It's better to leave them sitting in place so that anybody who's interested later and wants to know how these radios were really truly put together can see how they were put together. Of course, you can you know, the newer capacitors will be visible too, but that'll be a real obvious thing, but all the original stuff will be left untouched, and I think that's better. There is the volume pot. That's interesting. Look how this switch works, guys. Check this out. I love this. See that? It's just a little arm with a peg on it that operates a standard toggle switch. Looks just like the toggle switches that are in the Atwater Kents I've worked on. So, and it fits in a little groove. Check that out. In the top, in the head of the toggle switch, it fits in a little groove. I like that. That's really slick. So there's that to take care of. I hope that switch is good, because I don't know, I'll find one with that groove. I guess I could cut a groove if I needed to with a Dremel, but you know, why if I don't need to? That looks like it might be some kind of a pickup for phono. I don't know. I'll check that out. Or not pickup, but like a jack. All right, let's take a look at the power unit underneath, shall we? I must warn you, do not let what appears to be simplicity fool you. These radios can be quite complex because the wires are usually in pretty rough shape. They may look pretty, but the insulation inside will usually be pretty damn brittle. And if you have to move these wires around at all, you're replacing the wire, because that wire, it'll crack and stuff. And when you get into high voltages in the power supply especially, you don't want to leave that cracked. So they look simple, and sometimes they are simple, and sometimes they're not. You just have to just kind of hope and be really careful, because I'd really love to leave these wires alone. I mean, they look cool, and I like that the way the string is tied. That's all original. If I can leave that be, I certainly will. And in that case, then the radio will be simpler. But if I have to replace that, then I'm taking that string off of there and I'm disassembling that harness, and it becomes complex in a hurry. I've done a couple of radiolas, and also a GEH31. The GEH31 I had to, basically replace every wire in the thing, and it was a nightmare. So hopefully I won't have to do that with this. Got a couple of healthy looking power resistors. I'll check those out. They're wire wounds, and if they're okay, I'll leave them be. Tube sockets look really good, really clean. I don't see any issues with any of those. And this socket here looks pretty cool. Looks good to be in good shape. The wire, maybe I'll keep, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll sleeve a part of it. But if the wire is good, I think I'll leave it alone, because this really is just an interconnect between the power unit and the receiver. So once it's plugged in, it doesn't get moved much. Really, on this thing, it's just going to be replacing, or substituting caps. I won't depot anything in here. Substituting the big caps, fixing that speaker, and then checking the wires, make sure it's all okay, and then checking for continuity on the coils and the wire wounds. So hopefully this won't be any big deal. It is nice and clean. So you see that's not super glossy. There's a little bit of reflectiveness to it, and I might clean the other side with a little bit of 3M, but I doubt I'll do much, because we want this radio to look old. And you start polishing it, there are going to be areas you can't reach, and then you'll see differences, and that's really not good if you don't need it. Okay, oh, by the way, it's upside down, but there is the power unit tag. And this is a type 8P, so that's how I found the schemo, was looking at those two types on this unit, on this machine. And my spare power unit is the same one. Okay, the first thing I really like to do is remove things that I could damage in my handling of this. So, naturally that's going to mean the knobs. So let me pull the knobs off of here real quick. Oops. So there's a tuning knob. Power. This one here, it screws from the bottom. Alright, so I'll baggy those up in a second. And boy, this dial, this faceplate here is plywood that has a veneer on this side, and it's really pretty thin, so I'm going to go ahead and get that off of there too. Alright, let's so there's just 3 screws holding this on. While I'm at it, I will see if the guy doing the cabinet needs to do this faceplate. He might want to do that. He's actually finished the cabinet. He sent me word yesterday, so I'm a little behind the 8 ball trying to get this done. There are 4 little screws that hold this guy on. They're tiny, and you don't want to lose them because replacing them, I'll show you one of them, will be a real bugger, and then the one, whatever you get won't be the right color. So look how tiny that is. There's my finger next to it. Tiny little wood screws. I've never seen screws that small before in a radio. People think these radios were built like tanks. The truth is they're actually quite delicate in a lot of ways, and this is one of those ways. So I'll remove this. All I will do with this guy here is clean it up. I mean, clean the dust out and stuff. I'll wash it, and that is it. I do not like to polish these. There are those people who do, but I don't. I don't think it looks right. I don't think it looks natural. So I'm just going to put that in the baggie with the screws, and here's the wood. I'll get this over to the restorer here really fast. If I need to sand this down and lacquer it myself, I can, but I'd rather it match the rest of the cabinet perfectly. Okay guys, I can't say enough how important it is to put your parts in baggies. You don't have to remember what parts go with what if you baggie them as groups. So I put that little dial escutcheon in the same baggie as the screws, only I put the screws in a little baggie of their own inside that baggie. So I don't have to do much more than that as far as labeling of the parts go. I will label the baggie, what it goes with. I do a lot of radios. Sometimes I get them mixed up. It happens. So if they're labeled, great. This is Edison and this is the receiver part. Same thing with the knobs. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay with all the other Edison parts. And then, if you can, it really will help you later if you take the screws that you've removed where you can and you put them back where they came from. That will avoid confusion later, what size screw goes where, and it really can make it easier for you. So that's what I do. You can do it however you want to. That's the cool thing about a hobby, is everybody gets to do it the way they want. You can kind of see how the tuning cord goes. It goes around this drum on the tuning dial and must go around. Yep. Let's see if I can turn it a little bit and get some light in there. And just like I thought, that is a brass cord, braided cord. It goes around the drum here a couple times on the tuning dial, or on the tuning shaft. And then it goes over an idler wheel and goes up around this big pulley here. Okay, goes around this big pulley, comes back down, goes to another idler wheel and back to the drum. There's a screw in here, but I have to figure out what that screw is all about. So anyway, that's the basics of it. Goes around the drum, around this tuning shaft, over an idler wheel, around the big wheel, back down over another idler wheel, and back to the drum. As an aside, I almost never have to remove the cord. The cords usually, when they're brass or steel cord, they're braided wire like that, they are usually in great shape, and all I have to do is clean them up and clean up the surfaces they drive or ride on. What I will do, however, is remove this dial, this sort of half drum dial, and I'll clean it up. I will probably use mineral oil to clean it so that if the ink is water soluble, it doesn't come off. And I'll really gently clean over those handwritten call letters so that they can stay on there. And you also, then I polish the back side. You usually don't want to polish the front side too much because you risk taking the numbers off. But I'll polish the back side to try and clean up any old oxidized plastic off it, and I'll get the best pass through of the light on this thing. It's missing, looks like it's missing a light bulb. No big deal. Looks like there are 2 light bulbs that go on this guy, and that's no big deal. These wires usually are pretty rough on the lamps for an old radio like this. I will pull these covers off for the tuning condensers, these little dog houses, and take a look, but I'm expecting them to be pretty clean. I've been nursing this container of tip tinner for some time, and that's because I had a real hard time finding leaded tip tinner, and I don't like the lead-free garbage. I just don't like it. It doesn't work very well. It doesn't really seem to protect the tip as well as the leaded stuff does. So this came in the mail today, and it came all the way from England. And this is leaded tip tinner, and I don't know why I couldn't find any in the United States. I looked on Amazon, I looked on Mauser, I looked on DigiKey. Nobody had a leaded tip tinner. So I found this on eBay. These folks in Great Britain were selling this stuff, and it wasn't that high a price. It was a little more expensive than I would have paid in the US, but even Rayalco doesn't have the leaded stuff anymore. So I went ahead and bought 5 of these, man. This will last me a while, but I think that pretty soon I might just order 5 more and get them here, because who knows when they're going to quit selling them from England too. So that's just an idea. If you prefer the leaded tip tinner and you can't seem to find any, go out on eBay and look in particular for ones being sold from England, because that's the only place I could find this stuff. A few people have asked me what I do for solder wick, where I get it and how I use it. So I've shown how to use it actually, soaking up solder in a radio. But I'd like to take a minute now to show you how I prepare this stuff, so I always have some handy. I don't really like to use the spool as I'm working. It gets in my way, it comes unraveled, and it's just a pain in the butt. So let me show you what I buy. And I get this on Amazon. And if you type in, it's hard to find unless you type on Amazon, unless you type in the part number. So here's what I get right here. I don't know if I hope you can see that. This is solder wick, spelled without the L, with rosin. Okay, remember the rosin, because they sell it without rosin too, made by Chemtronics. And this is their phone number. You don't need that. This is, as you can see here, made in the USA. Big deal to me, as we all know. And I use size number 6. That's a big deal. Size number 6, which is it's 50-6-25. The 6 and the 25 I understand. I don't know what the 50 is. So 6 is size number 6, and it's a 25-foot spool. So it comes like this, 25 feet, or for you Brits on the other side of the water, it's 7.5 meters. Okay, comes in a little spool like this. When you first open it, you can kind of feel the sticky of the rosin on there, and that's a good thing. I like to keep this stuff fresh because that rosin dries out just like the rosin in your rosin cup. But it's not a big deal. That's just a preference for me. Okay, so let me show you what I do. I take an old pair of wire cutters like so, and I cut this stuff into about 1.5 inch lengths. Okay, so 1.5 inch, that's about 3.5 centimeters, something like that, 3 centimeters. Okay, and I'll go through and I'll cut about 100 of these, just depending on what I'm in the mood for. And I do it over a towel like this because they go flying everywhere, and I just collect them all up when I'm done. All right, so I cut a whole bunch of this kind here. All right, and I put them in this little container that I can close, and this container actually seals pretty decently, and it will keep the solder wick fresh too. And the reason I want to keep it quote-unquote fresh is if I can keep that rosin in good shape, it will help transport the solder through the wick a lot faster, and I don't have to apply as much heat. So it's kind of a cool deal. So once I've cut a whole bunch of these up, then I use these cheap hemostats. You can get these if you live in the States and you've got a Harbor Freight nearby. These things are like $1 a piece, maybe 2 or 3 at the most. And I've got 2 or 3 of these. It's just a cheap old hemostat, which is basically like a really light duty pair of pliers, like needle nose pliers, real light duty, with serrations on it. And then it clamps like a medical clamp with these little pawls right here. Okay. And what I do is I'll take 2 of these usually, because I like it. It just seems that it works best when I do 2 of them. I lay them like so. Okay. All right. Get the tip of the hemostat right on there like that. Click it a couple times, and now I've got something that I can reach into the radio with without heating up my hands. I'm not trying to soak solder off my fingers. I'm trying to soak it off the old solder joint. And usually the heat won't travel very far up this hemostat, somewhere in this area here. And it gets it exactly where I want it. I can manipulate this really well, and this works out great. And then when I'm all done, when they're soaked with solder, I'll open it up. Sometimes they'll stick to it. I just kind of grab it and tweak it off of there, and there I go. And I load a new pair on. And that's all there is to it. That's what I do. When I'm done cutting off some of this, so I'll only use a portion of this spool. You know, I'll cut, like I say, about 100 pieces on here. Then I'll go ahead and close that up. And I have a little baggie I'll put it in. I like to keep it as fresh as I can. So that's what I do for solder wick. I hope this is helpful. And also, when I buy this stuff, because it usually takes 3 or 4 or 5 days to get to me from Amazon, it's not Amazon Prime, and it's not cheap, by the way. I pay about $23 for this, but because it takes a little longer to get to me, I can't use my Amazon Prime on it. I usually order 3 or 4 at a time, and then I don't have to order for a while, because this will last me quite a while, but I do use it a lot. I don't really like solder suckers. I don't like the Hakko FR300 at all. The thing is a maintenance nightmare. I tried it, I own one, and I hate it. So this really is the way for me, and you'll have your way. That's the cool thing about hobbies. We all have our own way. All right, there's a pile I've just finished cutting. This will be enough to get me through the next couple radios, and it was about maybe 1/4 or so, maybe a little less than 1/4 of what's on this spool. So this will keep me going for a bit. Fred kind of got bored watching the radio work, so he decided to just entertain himself on the chair. That's the chair I sit in, by the way, but it doesn't belong to me. As you can see, it belongs to Fred. He's got that pesky tail that keeps following him around. And he keeps trying to catch it, but he can't quite seem to do it. It's just always a little out of reach. And it annoys the daylights out of the little fella. Did you catch it yet, Fred? No? Keep trying. Hey. Enough of that already. You're going to buy me a new chair when that's all torn up? Oh, good grief. You can see from the condition of the chair that I have so far been unsuccessful at deterring Fred from doing this with his claws. But he has such a good time with it, I don't see how I can make him stop. Okay, folks, I think I've gone on long enough for this video. I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. We'll get into the speaker next time around. That's going to be a big job. You'll see. Here I am. I've already started it, but I'll talk about this when we get back to the second video. For now, it is Sunday night, July the 2nd, 2017. I'm out here in your western outpost in Salt Lake City. It's late at night, so I'm kind of manning my post all by myself. And until next time, this is Michael. That's all for now.